Are you caught in the whirlwind of overwhelming responsibilities? And does the very thought of Monday morning send chills down your spine? Well, it's time to toss those feelings out the window. Welcome to Season 3 of the Take Notes podcast, where you get to make yourself the priority in order to show up as your best self. I'm your host, Jen Rafferty, former music teacher, emotional intelligence practitioner, mom of 2, and founder of Empowered Educator, and I've been where you are. In this season, we're not just talking about surviving, we are diving deep into thriving. Are you ready to take the lead in your life? Well, let's do this. Hello, and welcome back to another fabulous episode of Take Notes. I cannot wait to share this conversation with you. I am here today with Sarah Noll Wilson, who is the person you call when you are ready to do the hard work of leading yourself and leading others. Working with organizations that care deeply about their teams and understand the connection between staff development and organizational success, Sarah specializes in transforming relationships from good to great. Through her work as an executive coach, an in-demand keynote speaker, researcher, contributor to Harvard Business Review, and best-selling author of Don't Feed the Elephants, Sarah helps leaders close the gap between what they intend to do and the actual impact they make. She hosts the podcast Conversations on Conversations, is certified in co-active coaching, conversational intelligence, and is a frequent guest lecturer at universities. And in addition to her work with organizations, Sarah is a passionate advocate for mental health. Sarah, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jen. Excited to be in continued conversation with you that we're recording now for other people to enjoy.
I know. Before we started, we had this very lengthy conversation, and we're definitely going to be continuing after the recording too, because I am enjoying you very much. So I would love to actually talk about one of the things we spoke on before we pressed record, and that's kind of our shared background in theater and performance. And the shift that happened after our training to a world that didn't quite speak the same emotional language. So can you speak on a little bit how that transition happened for you, what you noticed, and how maybe that led to the work you do now?
Yeah, I spent the better part of my youth plus through college, undergraduate in an arts environment, right? Focusing on theater performance, theater education. And I needed to get a job where I had my nights free to be able to perform, and I needed insurance because I wasn't in a place to be a professional actor, to be honest, nor did I really want to be. I just loved it so much. And so I got a job in insurance. Now, keep in mind, I grew up, my background is my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My dad was a blue-collar oil truck driver, right? So corporate America was so foreign to me. And the thing that was such a whiplash, it was the language I used with you earlier, is the transactional nature of the relationships, the transactional nature of the conversations, obviously the transactional nature of the work, particularly in the work that we were doing. But one of the things I just observed was what we talked about, how we connected, felt so surface level and obligatory. Like, I don't know how to describe it other than that. And when I was even interviewed for this position, they asked me the question as a spry 23-year-old at the time, it's been some years ago, do you think you can sit still in a cubicle? And I was like, I don't know, let's try, let's see. But the thing that was part of my journey to where I'm at now is realizing that even though we were in this sort of machine that was corporate America, we were still humans in this machine and deeply craved connection, deeply craved being seen, deeply craved being supported. And also I'm always one for experimentation. So that's actually part of how I stepped into my work was I became really interested in, well, how can we do this training more effectively? My background in theater education wasn't teaching theater, it was using theater as an educational tool. So I partnered with a lot of schools and teachers to look at their curriculum and go, how do we do this more kinesthetically? How do we tap into more senses? How do we bring it more to the body, so to speak? And I thought to myself, how could I do this with insurance commission coordinator training? And lo and behold, you can do things more effectively. You can produce a better outcome. But yeah, that was the thing that was most jarring to me was just the surface level gliding past each other type of relationships and very surface level conversations, surface level connections. It just felt very transactional.
Yeah. And that is such a far cry from the theater space. And so, to paint a picture for folks who have not been in that sort of environment, can you share some of your takeaways from your memories from being in that space? I mean, for me, I grew up in theater too. Since I was 8, I was a part of a theater company. And so, being in that environment when everyone is not only, like you said, just super connected, it's tell me about your guts kind of thing, you know? And the way that we try on different emotions, we try on different characters as if we were to try on clothes, and we keep the ones we say yes to the dress for the ones that match the character we're aiming for, and we put the ones that don't to the side for later use. And that embodied emotional experience is one of my big takeaways. I would love to hear a little bit more about some of yours.
Well, and even related to that, the way that I always thought about it and approached acting, for example, was you were just discovering different parts of yourself. It wasn't, yeah, you were showing up in a way that was embodying somebody that wasn't you, so to speak, but ultimately that came from you, your body, your lived experience, your emotions. And so it was this beautiful, intensive practice in self-awareness. And there was also this incredibly vulnerable and risk-taking space for connection, for being intimate with people, not sexual, intimate with people, being intimate with people and how you worked with them in scenes, being intimate with people and how you did classes together. There was a lot of physical intimacy, again, not sexual, but a lot of physical intimacy and a lot of emotional intimacy. And the other thing that one of the things that I didn't appreciate at the time was the culture of feedback and how different that was in corporate America and how that's still such a hurdle for most people and most teams. And I was like, I got notes after every show. Anytime I was doing a scene in a class, not only did the teacher give you notes, all of your peers gave you notes. And was it always comfortable? No. But we just built up a resilience and an expectation that we would be told, hey, that worked really well, or that you did kind of miss the mark, or whatever the case is. And it was so normalized. That was a thing that was a real shift for me. But that idea of feedback, the biggest thing for me just was the like emotional intimacy with people. I really missed that when I got into the corporate setting. And I think that was part of my success, though, was bringing that into the space and creating a space for other people to step into their wholeness as people. And yeah, it's interesting actually to think about, but that's definitely part of what opened up my path. But it's also was my superpower a bit because I was so different from the rest of the folks. I didn't know what a 401k was. I was a theater major. I planned on being poor my whole life. Like, we weren't talking about savings plans. We were talking about headshots and and resumes. And the resumes were not work resumes. It was, what kind of roles do I have? And what kind of skills do I have?
Yeah, isn't that funny? I want to go back to what you said about emotional intimacy, because that emotional intimacy is another way of kind of painting a picture of what's happening right now with the attempt to create healthy social emotional learning environments in schools. But where I see it falling short is it stays at a very intellectual understanding of emotionality and how we express emotion, how we communicate about emotion. And when it all stays in our head, that's actually not where the feelings are. The feelings happen in the body.
Mm-hmm.
And so when there's this disconnection, we're actually not able to hit the mark, so to speak, in what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So can you speak a little bit about that, maybe transition to creating safe, really safe spaces? Not just because you said it's a safe space, but like an actual safe space to start exploring some of that emotional connection or emotional intimacy, as you called it.
Yeah, I really appreciate your question. It's an invitation for me to reflect on something in a way that I haven't reflected on it before. That point about staying in the head is first, I want to speak to that because that is one of the most common traps we see in the work we do. And the way we talk about it is people confuse knowing something with doing it, and they confuse doing it when it's easy to doing it when it's hard. We can talk about emotions. We can talk about self-awareness. We can talk about emotional regulation. We can talk about setting boundaries. We can talk about holding steady when things get really hard. And people will sit there and go, yeah, I know. We can talk about what it looks like to really hold space for someone. And intellectually, people will understand it. But doing it is a much different story. And so often what we see, especially because in our world, we're working with adults, we're typically working with very high achieving, accomplished adults who just stop and go, yeah, I'm good. And one of the ways I always explore it is that seems to resonate with folks is, I'll ask people who plays an instrument or who's learned a sport. And I'm like, when I played basketball in my younger days, I said, I didn't read a book on how to play basketball and go, I'm good. When I learned the piano or the accordion later, like I didn't take an hour webinar and say, I'm good. I practiced it to the point where it became unconsciously competent, right? And I think that we're missing that. So I just want to name that. One of the things that was coming up for me, as you said, how did you create that space? What was that? What did that look like? My first career, I tried really hard, but I was in a system that didn't value that. And I was working for leaders who didn't know how to show up in that way. That shifted in my last job before I started my company. And I always say her name whenever I can because she's no longer with us. But Erin Barfels was my chief human resource officer. She had gone through a lot of hard stuff. It was the first time she had gone through cancer. Unfortunately, that's what ended up taking her from us at too young of an age. She had navigated a number of losses in her own life. She had navigated her own mental health. And so she was at a place when I came on board of wanting to look at development differently. And so one of the things that set up the work that she and I did together, I think for the great success, is I had somebody who was in the position of power and authority and influence who didn't just believe it was important, but was trying to practice it herself. And we were able to do, at the time, what felt like incredibly progressive stuff, whether it was mindfulness training specifically for, we're not just going to intellectually talk about self-awareness and emotional regulation. We're going to really practice. What does that look like to be connected to our body? What does that look like when we're in a conflict situation to notice? How do we understand why breathing is so important, right? Not just because it's important, but understand the biology behind it. And how do we help people connect with their whole selves? That was our motto was like, don't develop the role, develop the whole. And it was like the whole person, right? Like, like we always have to clarify because that can get like real, like, wait, what? But like, how do we develop the whole person? And so one of the things that just allowed us to experiment in incredible ways to incredible success was the fact that I had somebody who was not just a champion and a sponsor, but she was right there with me, co-facilitating, co-creating, role modeling for folks. And so that was part of what contributed to that safety. There's only so much you can do when you don't have the power and authority to, right? We all can influence the people around us. I had a teacher who always said, be the daisy in the onion patch and other daisies will pop up. And if you want to do systemic change, you just do need somebody, or you need the authority to be able to influence on a broader scale. And that was an opportunity. Honestly, that changed my life and it set me on this trajectory to go, whoa, if we can do what we did here and I can do this with other companies, then I want to try to figure out how to do what we did in other places.
That's beautiful. And that's so similar to what we're doing through Empowered Educator with schools, because it cannot be this top-down initiative of, okay, guys, we're doing this new mindfulness initiative this year. And everyone's like, no way. How could you possibly put something else on my plate? You're telling me now I have to make time to breathe? It's crazy. I can't do that, And so when we kind of, I call it going through the back door, when we are empowering people, giving permission for people to give themselves permission to feel empowered in a way that they become the change. And that's when that ripple effect happens, because unless you are walking the walk, nothing changes. And when you mentioned not just talking about it, because knowing is one thing, doing is quite another, and doing when it's hard is quite another, we can't just stop there, because no one learns. Everything then continues to stay the same. And I am no longer available for that, because the goal for me is then by the time they get to corporate, everyone is primed in doing this stuff. So your job then becomes so much easier.
I would love to be irrelevant. That's my goal. I'm like, I don't want to do this work. I want people to be able to show up powerfully for themselves and others. So I'm out of a job, but unfortunately I have a lot of job security.
For sure. And this is the world that we're in, and which is why I think this work, anyone who comes to it, is so important, because you then get to be the agent of change. It's not just you, Sarah, and me, Jen. It's literally everyone who says yes to themselves in a way that is vulnerable and beautiful and really connected to that humanity that we're all missing so much. And like I said earlier, is a far cry from the days of theater and being in that emotionally safe space. So in the workplace, a lot of times this work is needed in high conflict situations. A lot of it stems from, as you said, feedback, where for someone who is used to getting notes from people, like, no big deal, we know it's not attached to our worth or our value as a human being. But those are skills that we learned along the way. It wasn't like we reached adulthood and went into the workforce being like, okay, got it. I know I'm totally worthy. My boss says this. I'm good. We need to learn these skills. I wish, but we need to learn these skills. And it's something that we consistently dance around. So can you talk a little bit about how this emotional connection, this emotional intimacy then translates to when we're in this high conflict situation, or even perceived high conflict situation?
Right. Thank you for that delineation, because I might perceive it as, oh, no big deal. And I don't realize you've been up the last 2 nights worried about this conversation. I want to take one quick step back real quickly. And that is to echo that point of, these are skills we're not born with. We are ultimately, as humans, we're animals that are born for survival and self-protection. And one of the things that's become really, really clear for me that I try to hold on to, it's not even that people haven't built it. So many people have never been around somebody to know what it could look like. They don't know what a healthy relationship could look like. They don't know what an effective team could look like, where psychological safety actually exists. Hell, I have times when I work with teams where even I go, damn, I've never seen this level of hell. Is this what's possible? And I work with hundreds of teams every year. And so some of it is people, not only do they not know it, they don't even know what good could look like. The thing that's fascinating, though, is, and this goes for all shapes, sizes, ages, genders, identities, right? Beliefs, when they experience being seen, being genuinely heard from somebody, it's always profound. And like, that was nice, even if they're uncomfortable with saying that was kind of nice. And so I just want to say that, which is why it's so important that more people do the work, because you're able to not only do it for yourself, but you're showing other people this is what's possible of how we can show up. So now let's go to emotionally charged conversations. It's always interesting when we're working with people or groups. And the thing that they always ask is, what's the right thing to say? What's the right thing? And I was like, there's no such thing as the right thing. I want to get a t-shirt. I'm a big t-shirt girl. So like, I want to get a t-shirt that says it depends, because I feel like my answer to every question about relationships or communication is, well, it depends. What's your relationship with this person? What's the power dynamic, right? Like there's so many factors, but there's no such thing as the right words, because what's right for you might not be right for me. What's right for us as white women might not be right for if we're working with a Black colleague or whatever. The language my clients in Hong Kong use are very different than my clients in Washington. And so we have to step away from like, there isn't a script. And actually my coach, Stephanie Chin, I love how she says, but there is a tone. Right? There is a way of being that can set it up for greater success. And really, if people want to get skillful at being able to step into and navigate those emotionally charged moments. And emotionally charged could mean a conflict. Emotionally charged could also be, I'm telling you how much I appreciate you. And that feels so scary for me right now. It requires us to have a super high level of self-awareness so that we can regulate our emotions, so our primitive brain doesn't run off with us. And we have to understand that we cannot stop that primitive brain. That reaction happens way too fast, but we can recover more quickly from it. And I like the language for myself and when I'm working with folks is, how do I hold steady? And I think of it almost like a buoy. Like the storm is coming, but the buoy is anchored. And so in order for me to hold steady in a moment where I'm in a heated debate, where I am having something tough happening to me or said to me or whatever the case is, and I'm trying to keep my highest functioning part of my brain working, then I have to learn these skills. And what's so tricky is building resilience isn't something you do when things are calm. And you don't realize you're building resilience while you're building resilience. Like some of it is you're going to mess up. Some of it is you have to be intentional in those moments to say, okay, I really want to attack you. How do I take a deep breath? How do I maybe say, let's follow up tomorrow? Or maybe how do I become aware of when I'm not standing up for myself, when I'm not speaking up clearly, when I'm not advocating for someone else or protecting someone else? And what do I need to do to step into that courage? I mean, I kind of danced in a lot of areas, but it really is, when I think about the skills we need to navigate conflict, it starts with self-awareness. You have to have that social awareness, that emotional regulation, so that then you can listen differently, so then you can ask questions differently, so then you can communicate differently and more effectively. That's the foundation. You can't do what's right, quote unquote, not that there is a right, but you can't do what's effective if you haven't taken care of yourself first.
Yeah, and that's the piece that completely gets leapfrogged over.
Yep.
Because when we put a mirror up to ourselves, it can feel profoundly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Especially if this is new to you and there hasn't been that practice yet. But those times that you're describing that build resilience don't always feel good.
No, they rarely do.
Right. And part of this is, what's happening is, I always like to offer this reframe too, is when it is difficult, here is a beautiful opportunity for you to learn something about yourself. Nothing's happening to you. What if it's happening for you to, in this moment, learn something new about yourself so that then you can show up differently? And so just for practicality's sake for right now, for those people who are listening, that, all right, Sarah, holding steady.
How the hell do I do that?
Yeah. So, right. That sounds great. I want some of that. How much does that cost? How do I do that if this is something that I want to kind of dip a little pinky toe in today?
Yeah. Yeah. Let's look at a couple different angles. If you know that you're going into a conversation, like if you have the ability and the space and the awareness that I'm going into a tough conversation, one of the practices that we use and we work on with our clients is, what's bigger than this conversation you could stay anchored to? So let's talk about educators. For example, we did a lot of work with some of our school systems in the heat of COVID, when particularly, so for folks listening, I'm in Iowa. Just for some context, there was a lot of aggression towards educators. There was a lot of vitriol towards educators around COVID precautions, and then now around what are my kids being taught and related to race, gender, sexuality, all of that. And so they were dealing with a lot of heat. And they're like, how do we keep showing up for these conversations when they're not conversations? We're just getting attacked. And one of the practices that was really valuable for them was, how do I stay anchored to something that's bigger than this conversation? And what do I need to resource myself when that starts to get too quiet? For most educators, no surprise, what's bigger than this conversation with this parent is that my ultimate goal is to create as much safety for these kids that I'm responsible for. It gives a certain level of power or steadiness or anchoring, whatever you want to use. But if I know this is a tough conversation, and what I'm going to stay connected to is that I love you so dearly, And I want to protect our relationship. And that's why this conversation matters. So that's a strategy you can use, is how do you stay anchored to what's bigger than this moment or this conversation to keep you anchored in this conversation? So that's just like more of a thinking. The other thing is, again, when you know you're going into a conversation, how do you prepare for that? So often we see people preparing for a confrontation instead of a conversation. And we know that the first 3 minutes of any conversation are really the most important. So we do a lot of work with people with what's your opening statement? Not like what's your argument, but how do you create an invitation to say, hey, can we follow up on that meeting? I want to hear what you have to say. I sort of left that not feeling great, and I'm not sure how you felt. Would you be open to talking to me about that? And there's a couple of things that are really effective about that. Asking the question, would you be open to? Nobody wants to say they're closed. They'll be like, yeah. Making sure that it isn't just, I need to tell you how I feel. I want to hear how you feel too. Listening is such a superpower and is an act of persuasion people don't realize almost, right? Because most people don't want implementation. They just want to be heard. So the more we can think about, okay, I'm going into this conversation. What's my goal? What's my strategy? What traps might I fall into that I have to be aware of? I know there are certain people that just trigger me because of who they are, because of their position. And when I say triggered, I get into real sassy mode. I can get into real like, oh, you want to go there? All right, now I'm going to cut you because you're being an idiot. Like that's what comes up for me. And typically it's some dude that calls me a girl, right? Like that just, phew. So I'm like, okay, Sarah, how do you stay in your best self? And when is it okay to be like, listen, like we're not doing that. The other thing from a visualization and just like a somatic practice, we have to understand deep breathing is effective because it's literally massaging our vagus nerve to send messages to our brain to say, you're safe, it's okay, right? So being able to take a deep breath. The other thing that I'll share, and this actually comes from my colleague, Dr. Teresa Peterson, as a way to hold steady. And I love this so much, and I'm not great at it, but I'm trying to be better. Nobody remembers a pause. Nobody remembers when you go, I want to take a moment and just think about that and be really thoughtful about what I say. There's a woman that is an amazing author, Elaine Lynn Herring. Her book is coming out in March called Unlearning Silence. Might be somebody you want to have on the show. She's incredible. But whenever I'm in conversation with her, she's one of the most measured people in that she always takes a couple moments before she speaks. And my ADHD brain is like so pained by that, but also inspired by that. But just remember, nobody will remember a pause. They'll remember what you said after that pause, but nobody will remember a pause. So those are just a couple of like different types of strategies to help you explore holding steady in those moments.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's funny. There's someone on my team also, Jillian Pulowski. I call it the Pulowski pause.
Oh, I love it.
She's also a master at the pause, and it is inspiring for me to remember to do that because my brain also is, all right, let's go. And it is so valuable. Those pieces of information that you just gave are so incredibly important and actionable today. There's nothing that is unattainable for those people who are listening right now. Give it a try.
Well, here's an even simpler one. Sometimes I do this, is I literally just, when I can feel my heart racing, when I can tell that I'm wanting to shrink or I'm wanting to grow and attack, I literally just, this is for me anyway, I just go, hold steady. And I try to imagine my feet just being secured to the ground. Just hold steady, Sarah. That's it. I'll just be like, hold steady, hold steady, hold steady. Say more about why you feel this way, right? Tell me more. And that's something for me anyway, that has become a really important practice, especially when I'm in situations where I'm receiving something really hard or I'm having to deliver something really hard.
Yeah. And that visualization is so powerful. Our brains are so much more powerful than we give them credit for. And we have so much autonomy in how we navigate our brain that when we bring it back to this is really just your biology, and it all comes down to safety. If your nervous system does not feel safe, you are unable to behave and action in a way that is aligned because you're in survival mode. And it's not as obvious anymore. We're not being chased by bears and saber-toothed tigers. It's emails and difficult conversations and Instagram and the news and your kids not putting away their laundry.
Or your friend not responding to a text and you're like, oh, is she mad at me? What is that? And we have to understand a couple of things. A stressed brain is a brain that can't trust. It's super hard for us to create trust with ourselves and other people when we're in that hijacked, flooded state. And we default to our most well-laid behaviors under stress, which are usually behaviors we learned as children. When we're under stress, we're just never going to show up at our best. We kind of show up as our worst selves in those moments, because again, we are just in protection mode. And even just understanding that's why I'm such a big proponent of people understanding the amygdala, is because it's that person, you are not being difficult. You are just so flooded and dysregulated, and that doesn't excuse your behavior, but it helps me understand and go, okay, we're not going to have this conversation in the next half an hour because I can see those hormones rising on your face, or I can feel it in myself. Let's come back tomorrow. So that's an important part of it as well.
Yeah. And it is that understanding, because you're right. It does not excuse poor behavior. But when we understand that this is just a part of our humanity, we give ourselves grace and other people grace. But you said something really interesting that struck me that I want to go back to. You said we can't trust when we're in the state of protection. And specifically, you said self-trust. Can you talk more about that?
I mean, when our protection mechanisms are fired off, whether it's a real threat, imagined threat, an anticipatory threat, we know that we physically lose access to the highest functioning parts of our brain. We lose access to, our prefrontal cortex, our ability to be empathetic, our ability to listen, our ability to be creative, our ability to problem solve and be rational, right? When I say we lose it, it's not a choice. We just literally don't have electrical activity as much as when we're fully present and we don't have all those hormones. And sometimes that, I know for myself anyway, and I see this in clients, is when you're under such a chronic state of stress, and whether that is self-induced or internal or external, I see it can manifest in doubt. I can see that it can manifest in low sense of self, low confidence, right? I experience it too. I know that I don't think as well about myself and my ability when I'm in a space of chronic stress. Here's how it often shows up, especially if you're working in a situation with colleagues or a boss that is harmful or toxic, or you're being gaslit or whatever, is it can be real easy for some people. Let me be really explicit here. It can be easy for some people to internalize that and then to doubt themselves in it. And so that's also an opportunity for us to hold steady, right? How do we recognize I have value and I'm valuable regardless of how other people view me right now? But I think that trusting your intuition, trusting your ability, just trusting yourself can decrease in those moments as well, because your body is just, what do we need to do to protect ourselves? And sometimes what we've learned is I'll protect myself by beating myself up.
Yes. Ooh, that hit.
Kind of hit me too a little bit. I'm a little misty talking about it. And I often see it more with women than men. It's not that I don't see it with men, but I definitely see it. And that can get into a whole nother conversation.
Sure, yes, but part two.
Right.
I think it's the same, but it manifests differently. It's expressed differently. Yeah. And that's a really beautiful moment then, and another opportunity to get really curious about yourself. Hey, I've been feeling this way. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
What needs to happen right now so that I can return to the place that feels really good and yummy? Because you deserve to feel good and yummy all of the time. You are a gift to this world. And we've just been taught and told explicitly and implicitly that we're not. And we forget really who we are, especially in those moments. And when it happens day after day, year after year, there's a lot of unlearning and remembering that gets to happen if you choose it. It's like red pill or blue pill.
Because once you see it, you don't unsee it.
That's right.
I love your language that you use, and that is language that I use. Isn't that interesting? That When I first learned about mindfulness, when I developed my panic disorder about 10 years ago, which now I actually know is OCD, but it was misdiagnosed. I was having panic attacks just on the regular. And part of what helped me develop through it was, how do I ride these waves instead of fight them? Because that's really the best way to navigate anxiety is not to try to dismiss it or get away from it, but it's actually to be present with it and realize I can handle this. It's temporary. It'll pass. And it was always like, oh, isn't that interesting? In a genuine curious place of interesting. I see you, brain. Like I have a lot of conversations with myself of just, oh, that's interesting, Sarah, that you had this reaction. Or that's interesting that you felt you compared yourself to this person. And now, isn't that interesting how you feel worse because you compared yourself? Just that being our motto is very much be chronically curious. And fun fact about curiosity is curiosity lives in our highest functioning part of our brain. So when we can start to activate it, it actually like calms down that amygdala sometimes. But I just wanted to like echo that language of, for folks who maybe are listening are like, I don't know how to do this. What does it look like to just have a moment and go, that was an interesting reaction, even if you can't catch it in the moment. So I wanted to just echo that because that was such a key for me. And I love that when you said that, I was like, yeah, you're my people.
I appreciate that. Yeah. And it's that non-judgment space where, like you just said, curiosity comes from that highest place. Judgment doesn't. Judgment comes from that place of fear and mistrust, and they can't coexist.
Right.
So when you have a moment of awareness of the judgment, whether outwardly or self-judgment, consciously replacing that with curiosity becomes the antidote.
Yeah. And it's a practice. It's doing the scales to learn the instrument. I was working with a client once and it was a gentleman and he was like, I just don't feel anything. And I was like, well, you do. You've just been culturally conditioned to not be in touch with it. And so one of the exercises we did that was quite profound for him was we just set a reminder to pop up randomly to just take a moment and in this moment go, how do I feel? What am I thinking? What do I notice? So that it wasn't when it was hard. It was mundane, like, oh, interesting. I'm a little tired right now and I hadn't realized I was tired, or I'm feeling really good right now. I'm feeling happy, or I'm down today. And so again, that's part of that building that curiosity has to happen in the small moments so that it can show up when it's hard.
Yeah, I describe it often as we're going to the gym. When you get to that moment, you've been training for this whole time, so like, you're good to go.
You can hold that plank, baby. Like you can do it. You've been working on that plank. You can do it.
Yes. And by the way, I do need to ask you now the same question that I ask all of my guests, which is, from your perspective, keeping in mind this beautiful conversation that we had, what is your dream for the future of education?
I have a lot of feels as I think about that. As I shared, I have a lot of family in education. I have a lot of investment in education. And that the initial words that come up for me, I want education to be safe again, and safe for lots of reasons, but physically safe. I want educators to have freedom. There's so many great teachers who know how to create a great, safe learning environment and can't because they have to follow such a strict curriculum that is so often created by people who don't actually understand how learning works. So like, that's what I mean by freedom. And one of the things that I see is so much of our education system in America is so focused on a certain way of being, a certain way of listening and sitting and paying attention and regurgitating information. And I know there are schools that are doing really creative stuff and challenging that, but that's still fairly the norm. And then they get into the workplace, and this isn't just like a generational thing. This was true of us too. Then we're asking them to be innovative. We're asking them to take risks. We're asking them to be okay that, we're not going to get an A on every test or whatever. Like, just how do we continue to rethink what kids are learning and how they're learning to actually set them up for greater success beyond just like an intellectual, like critical thinking, emotional thinking. And again, I know this is already happening and it's not happening fast enough. And that like, the other thing I'll say is like that kids have more time to play. There's just so much rigor and there's so much value in unstructured play. And we know that there's a connection between that and like the lower resilience we're seeing in young people, right? They don't have the moments to have to negotiate with each other. But like, I want everyone to feel safe. I want them to be able to be safe. I want them to be able to be themselves, whatever that is, and to be able to learn in ways that best serve them.
Yes. All of that.
Such a great question. Thank you for that.
It is my favorite question. And as an unapologetic optimist, I really do believe that the more that we say our dreams and share them out loud, the closer we are to having them become our reality.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful question, and everyone answers it a little bit differently. And I'm
sure.
Get emotional hearing other people's dreams about this, because if and when they do come true, this world is going to be so beautiful.
We have so much potential. We have so much potential to be really incredible. And thank you for that.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And something that's coming up for me now that I feel compelled to share, I've been playing around with, there's been this thing floating around for every once in a while, it pops up, these 6-word autobiographies. Have you seen this? And a dear friend of mine is an English teacher, 6th grade English teacher. And we met, it was one of my first jobs almost 20 years ago at this point. And she did this exercise with her kids then, these 6th graders. And one of them wrote something that still stays with me every day. And I get choked up even thinking about this, but it's relevant to what you just said. His autobiography was just a shadow of my potential.
Oh, wow.
I think about that often, especially when we're talking about our dreams like this, because while on a micro level, I get to remember that every day about myself, there's so much more. We're just warming up. On this macro systems level, there's so much available.
Yeah.
And if we keep moving in the right direction, collectively, we'll get there.
Yeah. Life's just, it's better. Right? It's better when you're open. It's better when you can connect. It's better when you can be with, it's just, that's how I feel. Whenever I'm in conversation or relationship with somebody that's nourishing, it's just, life is so much better.
Yeah. Yes.
Or we can have real conversations and all of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that certainly was what this was for me. So thank you for this nourishing conversation, Sarah. Before we go, I would love for you to share with the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about your work.
Yeah. Our website is my name, SarahNollWilson.com, but we are a company of many individuals now, and we're really passionate about helping leaders people better. My DMs are always open as well. LinkedIn is a good place to connect with me. But SarahNollWilson.com.
Awesome. And all those links, including the link to your book, will be in the show notes, so people will have a really easy time just clicking and learning some more. So thank you so much for your time and your talents. I really appreciate you spending your morning with me.
Yeah, likewise. Right back at you. Thanks, Jen.
And if you loved today's episode, which I know you did, go ahead and write a 5-star review, share with a friend, and we'll see you next time on Take Notes. Incredible, right? Together, we can revolutionize the face of education. It's all possible, and it's all here for you right now. Let's keep the conversation going at Empowered Educator Faculty Room on Facebook.